Britney was the school's biggest bully, until one day, everything changed. One shove, one scream, and she never walked again. But the truth behind what really happened on those stairs, it's darker than anyone ever imagined. Want to know why? It's funny how certain people leave a mark on your life without you ever realizing it at the time. For me, that person was Britney. I wouldn't call her infamous, not in the grand scheme of the world, but in the small ecosystem of our high school. She was the kind of person you knew about. Everyone did, whether you had met her directly or not. She had this energy, a kind of effortless command over everyone in the school that made you aware she existed, even if she never looked your way. I suppose that's why I still remember her clearly, years later, in all the small details: the curl of her hair, the sharp tilt of her smile, the way she walked through the hallways, like the world was hers. I was 15 at the time, in the final year of middle school, trying to find my footing. I wasn't one of the popular kids, but I wasn't invisible either. I floated somewhere in the middle, quietly observing most of the time, trying to navigate friendships, homework, and the pressure of looming exams. Britney, though, existed on an entirely different plane. She was a year older, a grade above, and she had a reputation that preceded her, not for grades, not for sports, not even for charm, but for the way she could twist a room, manipulate people, and make life miserable for anyone she fancied. She didn't bother me directly, probably because I was in her grade, but I watched her wreak havoc on younger students with a mixture of fascination and fear. I'd hear the whispers in the corridors, the hushed conversations of kids, describing how she'd humiliate someone over something trivial, like forgetting a textbook or wearing the wrong shoes. Sometimes it was subtle, a rumor whispered at the right time to ruin someone's day, or a clever jab that left a kid questioning themselves for weeks. Other times it was more obvious, the kind of cruelty that made you step in if you could, but you couldn't always be there. I wasn't a hero, far from it. Most of the time I was just another bystander, silently tallying the injustices in my head, pretending to be invisible, pretending to be safe. Teachers were of little help. Britney had this ability to charm them too. It was infuriating. She'd smile at them, bat her eyelashes, sound polite, and suddenly all complaints vanished. Maybe that's what made her dangerous, the sense that she could do whatever she wanted without real consequences. I remember my friend Maya telling me once that she felt trapped in the school like a bird in a cage, constantly watching for Britney's next move. And I think in some way I shared that same feeling, even though I was never her direct target. You get used to looking over your shoulder when someone like that exists. The closer we got to finals, the more palpable the tension in school became. Students were stressed, teachers were stressed, and Britney, well, she thrived in chaos. You could almost see her smirk when someone faltered, when someone forgot to submit an assignment or stumbled in class. But then, something strange happened. As the weeks ticked closer to our final exams, she disappeared, complete. No one had seen her in days, and her absence was like a ghost passing through the hallways, felt, discussed, and noticed, but never explained. I asked around, of course. My classmates shrugged, and murmured excuses, some claiming she was sick, others suggesting she was skipping, and a few just laughed and said good riddance. I didn't know what to think until I finally cornered one of the teachers, Miss Helpin, a history teacher with a soft voice and a tendency to ramble when uncomfortable. "Oh, she broke her leg," he said, casual, as if we were discussing someone's lost umbrella. "She hasn't shown up to school." I blinked. "What? How?" He shrugged. "A kid shoved her down the stairs. Got expelled, of course. And that was it. Nothing more. No lecture on karma. No moralizing. Just a factual statement. Dry and clinical, as if we were talking about a statistic instead of a person who had been the center of fear and chaos in our school." I didn't question further. I didn't want to. There was a strange sense of balance in that moment, even if it was disturbing. The bully gone, the victim still standing, the world somehow tipping just slightly back toward normal. Months passed. I almost forgot about her, the way you almost forget a bad dream once the sun is up. Then, one afternoon, my mom and I went to the mall. It was early summer, the air conditioning a relief from the sweltering heat outside. We found a table in the food court, trays of fries and lemonade, the usual weekend routine. talking about nothing in particular. That's when I saw her. She was sitting just a few feet away in a wheelchair, her face pale and tight with discomfort, her usual arrogance replaced by something fragile and human. She looked miserable, not the sort of miserable that comes from a bad grade or an argument with a friend, but a deeper, more permanent kind of misery. Her legs were bound in bandages, the wheelchair propped to carry her weight, and she seemed small, almost invisible in the bustle of the mall crowd. I felt nothing for her really, not pity, not satisfaction, just a kind of detached acknowledgement that life had a strange way of balancing itself out. I told my mom briefly about her, and then we moved on, finishing our meal and walking toward the parking lot. That was the last time I saw her. Even now, thinking about it, I can't decide whether I felt relief, justice, or just neutral curiosity. Life has a funny way of changing the narrative without consulting anyone involved. And in that moment, Britney's absence and her sudden stark vulnerability was a reminder of how fragile the world really is, even for someone who seemed untouchable. The weeks leading up to Britney's fall felt heavy, almost suffocating. It was the end of March 2015, and finals were looming over all of us, like a dark cloud we couldn't escape. You know how schools get around that time. Teachers push harder, parents expect more, and students barely sleep. Everywhere you went, there was this tense energy, a cocktail of exhaustion and panic mixed with teenage drama and unspoken rivalries. But for some reason, Britney seemed worse during those weeks. Looking back now, maybe she knew her hold over everyone was slipping. When people are desperate to keep control, they do strange things. She started picking on younger kids even more than usual, especially 6th and 7th graders. There was this one kid, Ayan, a quiet boy with thick glasses, who had transferred mid. He was shy, polite, and brilliant at math, basically the perfect target for someone like Britney. I remember walking past the lockers one day and hearing her voice, sharp and mocking. I didn't need to see her face to know it was her. That laugh, the one that started soft but always ended like a slap, was unmistakable. She was cornering Ayan with 2 of her friends, holding up his notebook, flipping through his neatly drawn equations, and making fun of him for trying too hard. When he tried to grab it back, she yanked it away and pretended to drop it by accident straight into a puddle of muddy water outside the classroom door. I froze. I wanted to do something. I really did, but my feet stayed glued to the floor. And that's the thing about being a bystander. Guilt doesn't hit you in the moment. It comes later, like a delayed punch to the gut. Ayan eventually picked up his ruined notebook, eyes red, muttering something under his breath. Britney just walked away, laughing like it was the best day of her life. And that wasn't an isolated incident. There was another girl, Priya, a sweet, soft-spoken kid from 7th grade who came from a small town. She had a thick accent, and sometimes struggled with English, which made her an easy target. Britney would mimic her voice behind her back, twisting every word into a joke, making the whole hallway laugh. There were days Priya didn't even want to come to school. I found her once in the girls' bathroom, quietly crying while splashing water on her face, whispering, "I hate this place." That image stuck with me for weeks. It wasn't just the bullying, it was the fear she spread like a ripple effect. Even students in her own grade kept their distance. If you weren't in her little circle, you had to be careful. Sometimes in our group chats, my friends and I would discuss strategies to keep an eye on younger students, so Britney couldn't corner them. But we weren't superheroes. We couldn't be everywhere at once. And she knew that. The teacher, useless. No matter how many complaints piled up, Britney walked away with a slap on the wrist every time. She had a way of twisting situations, painting herself as misunderstood, even charming. I still remember Miss Kapoor, our English teacher, calling Britney such a smart, talented young woman during open day in front of everyone's parents. My friends and I exchanged looks of disbelief, but no one said a word. It wasn't worth it. Then came March 27, 2015, the day everything changed. I wasn't there when it happened, but I've pieced together fragments from whispers, rumors, and the fractured memories of those who were. It was between periods, the stairwell on the east side of the building, the one that always smelled faintly of wet cement because of a leaky pipe. Britney was on the 2nd floor, taunting a younger kid, a 7th grader named Rahul. I'd seen Rahul around before. He was short, scrawny, and wore oversized shirts like he was always trying to hide. No one knows exactly what Britney said that day, but those who heard bits and pieces said it was cruel, even by her standards. Something about Rahul's stutter, his clothes, maybe even his family, and then in one split second, he shoved her. Maybe he didn't mean to, maybe it was instinct, or maybe he'd been bottling it up for months, but Britney stumbled backward, lost her balance and fell down nearly a full flight of stairs. A loud thud, screams, chaos. By the time a teacher reached her, she was crumpled at the bottom, her leg bent at an unnatural angle. People say there was silence for a moment, that eerie kind of silence where the air feels frozen, and then it exploded into noise, shouting, crying, teachers yelling at students to step back. Someone ran to the office. Someone else called an ambulance. Rahul stood there, pale and shaking, his hands trembling like he didn't understand what he'd just done. I try to imagine what went through his head at that moment, and I still can't. I wasn't there, but the image burned into my mind anyway, constructed from fragments of second-hand memory. When I heard about it later, a strange cocktail of emotions churned in my chest: shock, fear, and if I'm honest, a quiet, guilty sense of justice. Within hours the school was buzzing like a hive. Rumors spread faster than facts, but one thing was certain: Britney was in the hospital, and Rahul was gone, expelled. No warnings, no hearings, just. That afternoon, as I sat in my room trying to process everything, I thought about Ayan, about Priya, about all the nameless younger students who'd flinched when Britney walked by, and I wondered if Rahul had done what all of us had secretly imagined at least once, not out of malice, but out of desperation. But the truth is, nothing about that day felt triumphant. It was messy, tragic, and irreversible. One shove, one fall, and a girl who had once ruled the hallways like a queen would never walk the same way again. The Monday after Britney's fall felt different. I remember walking into school that morning and immediately sensing the hallways were quieter, almost subdued, like someone had turned the volume down on the entire building. People still whispered, of course they always do, but the usual chaotic hum of teenage chatter was gone. Instead there was this strange tension in the air, like everyone was holding their breath, waiting for something to happen. For the first time in years, Britney wasn't there. I didn't realize how much space she occupied until she wasn't around anymore. Usually you could hear her laughter bouncing off the walls, or her sharp voice cutting through conversations, or the quiet ripple of students instinctively stepping aside when she walked past. Without her the atmosphere felt lighter, not in a celebratory way though. It was a fragile, uneasy quiet, like everyone knew we were standing on unstable ground. No one had all the details about what happened, but the rumors were relentless. Some said Rahul had planned it, others claimed Britney slipped and he just happened to be there. One story said she'd broken both legs, another said she was paralyzed for life, and a few kids even whispered that she was suing Rahul's family. Nobody really knew the truth. The school administration, of course, wasn't saying much, just a short announcement over the PA system, asking everyone to respect the privacy of those involved. That only made the whispers louder. I overheard conversations in the cafeteria, where students debated whether Rahul was a hero or a criminal. One group insisted he'd been pushed too far, that someone needed to stand up to Britney and he'd finally snap. Another group argued that no matter what she'd done, shoving her was too extreme, that he'd ruined his life along with hers. And then there were people like me, caught somewhere in the middle, unsure of how to feel. I kept thinking about Ayan, about Priya, about all the kids Britney had tormented. I remembered their tears, their humiliation, their quiet prayers for her to leave them alone. But even with those memories sharp in my mind, I couldn't bring myself to celebrate what had happened, because the truth was, it wasn't just Britney's life that had changed forever. The day after the incident, our school held an emergency assembly in the auditorium. The principal stood on the stage, hands clasped, trying to look composed. His voice was calm but tight, like he was choosing each word carefully to avoid lawsuits. "We are deeply saddened by the recent incident," he said, his gaze sweeping over the rows of students. "This is a reminder that violence has lasting consequences for everyone involved." That was it. No names, no specifics, no real answers. After the assembly, the hallways exploded with noise again, everyone dissecting every word the principal didn't say. I walked with Maya, and a few others back to class, and she whispered, "They're covering it up. You know they are. They don't want parents freaking out." She wasn't wrong. Parents were freaking out. Over the next few days, I overheard teachers muttering about meetings with the school board, and there were whispers about angry phone calls, threats of lawsuits, and demands for better student protection. But then finals came barreling in, and just like that, life moved on, at least on the surface. I thought I'd never see Britney again. Months passed, and summer arrived. My world shifted back into the usual rhythm: exams, results,
the awkward excitement of moving into a new grade. I stopped thinking about her. Or maybe I just forced myself not to. Then came August 20. My mom and I had gone to the Phoenix Mall on a humid Saturday afternoon, one of those sticky monsoon days, where the air feels heavy on your skin. We stopped at the food court, grabbed plates of biryani and cold drinks, and found a table near the glass railing overlooking the first floor. That's when I saw her, Britney. She was sitting just a few feet away from us, and for a second I didn't even recognize her. Gone was the girl who used to strut through school with effortless confidence. The Britney in front of me looked smaller, frail. Her long hair was tied up in a messy bun, dark roots showing. She wore a simple oversized hoodie and loose sweatpants. But what stood out the most was the wheelchair. Her right leg was strapped in a brace, the metal frame gleaming under the bright lights of the mall. There were faint scars along her knee, angry red marks like reminders carved into her skin. She looked pale, exhausted, and empty in a way I couldn't describe. I froze, tray in hand, just staring at her. For months, I had imagined this moment, wondered what I would feel if I ever saw her again. I thought maybe I'd feel triumphant, maybe even smug. I thought I'd see her broken and feel a sense of justice, of balance. But standing there, looking at her slouched in that wheelchair, something unexpected washed over me. Nothing, no pity, no satisfaction, just nothing. My mom noticed me staring and followed my gaze. I told her quietly who Britney was, explaining just enough for her to understand, and she raised her eyebrows, but she didn't say much. We sat down, ate our food, and when we left, I glanced back one last time. Britney was still there, fiddling with her phone, her expression blank, like the world had simply drained out of her. That was the last time I ever saw her, but it wasn't the end of her story for me, because after that day, I couldn't stop thinking about how fragile everything really is. One push, one moment, one decision, that's all it takes for life to shatter into pieces you can't glue back together. For weeks, I found myself replaying old memories, her laugh echoing through the hallway, Ayan's ruined notebook, Priya's tear-streaked face, and contrasting them with the image of Britney slumped in her wheelchair. I wondered if she thought about those kids now. I wondered if she regretted anything, or if she hated Rahul, or if she hated herself. Maybe all of it, maybe none of it. And sometimes late at night, when the guilt crept in, I thought about Rahul. I never saw him again after that day. He disappeared from our lives completely, but I couldn't stop imagining where he was, what he was doing, whether he regretted that shove. Was he okay? Did his parents forgive him? Did he forgive himself? Because that was the thing nobody wanted to admit. The moment Britney fell, it wasn't just her life that changed. Rahul's did too, and maybe mine did, in a way I didn't understand yet.
Time is strange. When you're 15, you think life is made of milestones, the first crush, the first heartbreak, the first big exam, but the truth is, life also happens in the cracks between those moments. It sneaks up on you in whispers, in the quiet spaces, in the things you try not to think about. That's what happened with Britney's fall. On the surface, school moved on. By September 2015, Britney was just gone. Her name disappeared from attendance sheets, her laughter vanished from the halls, and the constant tension she carried with her seemed to dissolve like smoke. But her absence didn't fill the air with relief, the way I'd imagined it would. It left a hole, a strange emptiness we didn't know how to process. And in that emptiness, something began to shift. Without Britney, the dynamics among students started to change. Younger kids, especially those she used to target, began to breathe a little easier. I noticed Aizan laughing more openly, hanging out with a few classmates without constantly glancing over his shoulder. Priya started joining group discussions instead of hiding in the library. Even the hallways felt different, like we had reclaimed a small piece of freedom we didn't know we'd lost. But along with that freedom came something heavier, a kind of collective guilt. None of us said it out loud, but I could feel it lingering in conversations, in the way people avoided talking about her directly. It was like an unspoken agreement. We weren't going to celebrate what happened, but we weren't going to mourn it either. We just carried it, quietly. And then there was Rahul. The administration scrubbed him from our school records as if he'd never existed. It was surreal. His locker was emptied overnight, his name erased from class lists, his photos removed from yearbooks. Teachers avoided mentioning him, like saying his name would summon a storm they couldn't control. But for those of us who'd seen him every day, who'd walked past him in hallways and maybe exchanged shy nods, his sudden disappearance was jarring. I couldn't stop thinking about him. Not because I thought he was a hero, I wasn't naive enough to romanticize what happened, but because I kept imagining the weight he must have been carrying. A single moment of panic, one shove, and his entire life had unraveled. He was 15, like me, 15, and he'd been branded, expelled, cast out, while the rest of us got to keep going. Late at night, lying in bed, I'd replay that day in my head even though I hadn't been there. I'd picture Rahul's trembling hands, Britney's shocked face, the sharp sound of her body hitting the stairs, the chaos that must have erupted around them. My brain filled in the blanks like a bad movie I couldn't turn off, and every time I imagined it, the same questions circled in my mind. Did Rahul regret it? Did Britney? Was there a universe where this didn't happen at all? Those thoughts followed me into the next year, but something else did too, a quiet awareness of how fragile everything really was. Before that day, I used to think consequences were straightforward. You do something wrong, you get punished. You work hard, you get rewarded. But life isn't like that. It's messy and uneven and unfair. Sometimes people like Britney get away with hurting others for years, until one random chaotic moment flips everything upside down. And yet, even with her gone, I found myself carrying pieces of her story with me. The memory of seeing her in the mall haunted me. The wheelchair, the way she stared at her phone like she was trying to disappear into it, the hollowness in her expression. She looked nothing like the girl who used to command entire hallways with a single glance. That Britney had been stripped away, leaving behind someone I didn't recognize, and I kept asking myself why I didn't feel anything, why there was no satisfaction, no sense of balance. Part of me thought I should have felt relief for Ayan, for Priya, for everyone who'd suffered because of her. But deep down it felt wrong to equate her misery with justice, because the truth was, Britney was 15 too, just a kid who had probably learned cruelty somewhere along the way, from someone else, and replicated it because it gave her power, in a world where teenagers are powerless most of the time. I thought about her home life, about the parents who never showed up for open houses, about the times I overheard her snapping at phone calls in the hallway. I started to wonder if maybe her behavior hadn't come out of nowhere. That realization didn't excuse what she did, but it complicated it. It made her human, and maybe that's what unsettled me the most. By the time we started our new school year in 2016, the incident had faded into background noise, a story whispered to new students like a warning: don't mess with people, don't let things get that far. You don't want to end up like Britney or Rahul. But for me, it was more than a cautionary tale. It became a quiet turning point. I started noticing the smaller cruelties around me, the casual gossip, the mocking jokes, the way we sometimes hurt people without realizing it. And for the first time, I found myself stepping in, even if just a little. I'd interrupt rumors, redirect conversations, tell friends to drop it when they mocked someone behind their back. Not because I thought I was better than anyone else, but because I'd seen where unchecked cruelty could lead. There was this one moment in early 2016 when a couple of kids in my class were making fun of a boy's stammer during lunch. Old me would have stayed quiet, pretending not to hear, but something in me shifted. I walked over, put my tray down, and said, "That's not funny. Cut it out." My voice shook when I said it, my heart pounding in my chest, but they actually stopped. And for the first time in a long time, I felt stronger, like I'd taken back a tiny bit of control from the chaos we'd all been through. In a strange way, Britney's absence and the storm she left behind taught me more than any lecture or assembly ever could. It taught me how thin the line is between being safe and being shattered, how easy it is for resentment to build until it explodes, how quickly everything can change. And yet, even as I grew from it, a part of me still carried the weight of that day, because for all my attempts at empathy, at understanding, there was one truth I couldn't escape. Britney would never walk the same way again, and Rahul, wherever he was, he would carry that moment for the rest of his life. It's been almost 10 years since that day on the stairs, but sometimes it still feels like yesterday. I'm 25 now, sitting by the window of my apartment in Pune, watching the late evening traffic crawl past. Outside, life moves in constant motion, cars honking, street vendors shouting, the sun dipping behind glass towers. But inside my head, there are certain memories that never move forward. They're frozen, untouched by time, playing on a loop whenever I least expect them to. Britney falling, Rahul trembling, the silence that followed. I didn't realize back then how much that incident would follow me into adulthood. I thought time would wash it away the way it washes away most teenage drama, but it didn't. If anything, time gave it weight. I've learned a lot since leaving school. I studied psychology in college, maybe subconsciously trying to understand people like Britney, people who hurt others and people who carry hurt without knowing what to do with it. I ended up working at an NGO that counsels teenagers, and sometimes when I sit across from a kid who feels trapped, bullied, isolated, angry, I see glimpses of everyone from back then. The quiet ones like Ayan, who carry shame without ever deserving it. The resilient ones like Priya, who silently endure cruelty until they can't anymore. The ones like Rahul, who reach their breaking point. And even the ones like Britney, who weaponize their pain against others. I didn't realize it when I was 15, but everyone's fighting a battle you can't see. Back then, I thought Britney was invincible, untouchable. But now when I look back, I wonder what her nights were like when the hallways were quiet, when no one was around to see her be powerful. I wonder if she cried in the privacy of her room, if she fought with parents who never seemed present,
if maybe she was replaying her own bruises by leaving them on others. I never got answers. The last time I ever saw her was still that day in the mall, August 2015. Her face pale, her body slouched, her phone gripped like a lifeline she couldn't let go of. She must be 25 now too, same as me. I sometimes wonder where she is. Does she still live in this city? Does she still use a wheelchair? Did she ever forgive Rahul? Did she ever forgive herself? And Rahul, he's a ghost. I searched for him once, years ago, late one night when nostalgia and guilt collided in my chest. I typed his name into Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, nothing. It was like he'd vanished from the face of the earth. I still wonder where he went after being expelled. Did he move to another city, another country? Did he rebuild himself? Or did he carry the weight of that one shove for the rest of his life? I like to imagine he's okay now, that he found a place where no one whispers his name, where no one sees him as the boy who pushed Britney down the stairs, a place where he got to start over, free of the shadow of that moment. I hope that for him, even though I'll probably never know, sometimes when I visit my old school, I catch myself standing near the stairwell where it all happened. It's been renovated now, the walls freshly painted, new railings installed, brighter lights overhead, but I swear the air feels heavier there, like it remembers. Students walk past laughing, unaware of the story buried in those steps, and I almost envy them for it. They don't know, they don't carry it, but I do. Over the years I've realized that we rarely get neat endings in life. There's no moral tucked into a bow, no justice cleanly served. Back then, I thought Britney's downfall was karma. Now I know it was just tragedy, not because she didn't deserve consequences, but because nobody deserved the way it unfolded. Not her, not Rahul, not the rest of us caught in between. And yet, that day changed me. It taught me to pay attention to the smaller cruelties, the passing comments, the invisible wounds people carry. It taught me that silence is dangerous, that stepping in, even when your voice shakes, matters more than you think. It taught me that nobody is untouchable, not really, and that power built on fear always crumbles eventually. But above all, it taught me that sometimes, when pain passes from one person to another, the cycle just keeps spinning until someone stops it. And maybe in a strange, unexpected way, Rahul's shove stopped it, at least for us. At least in that hallway, at least for a while. I don't know where Britney is now. I don't know where Rahul is either. Maybe I'll never know. But sometimes, on quiet nights like this, I sit by the window and think about them. About the way one small moment in a teenager's life can ripple outward, shaping who you become, shaping the way you love, forgive, and protect others. We were just kids, all of us, but life doesn't care about that. And so somewhere out there, Britney lives her story. Somewhere else, Rahul carries his. And here I am, carrying mine. Even after all these years, I still think about that day, not with anger, not with satisfaction, not even with regret, just acceptance. Because sometimes the stories that shape you most aren't the ones you choose, they're the ones that choose you.